Picture this, right? You are sitting on your couch, you're scrolling through your phone, and with exactly one tap, literally just one tap,
Yeah.
you can have a hot meal or a new pair of shoes or, a replacement charger delivered to your door by tomorrow morning.
Yeah, or even by this afternoon in some places.
Exactly. This incredible, almost science fiction reality we live in where we are constantly surrounded by the illusion of this infinite horizon. Like resources just feel utterly inexhaustible to us.
Right, feel completely unlimited. And that frictionlessness is, well, it's a defining feature of the modern era. It's heavily engineered into our daily lives. I mean, convenience has basically become our primary metric for human progress.
Yeah, like how little effort do I have to exert to get exactly what I want right now?
Exactly. But beneath that engineered convenience, if you look at the research, it points to this persistent, nagging emptiness that a lot of people report feeling. It's a psychological void that paradoxically material surplus just cannot seem to fill.
Yeah. Which brings us to the core mission of today's deep dive. We are looking at a massive stack of sources today. I mean, we're talking about texts spanning 2,500 years of human thought.
Yeah, it's quite a range.
It's huge.
Yeah.
We have ancient philosophical texts, foundational religious doctrines, and then we're pairing that with cutting-edge modern science like fMRI brain scans. And despite coming from completely different eras and cultures and disciplines, they all converge on this startling conclusion.
They do, yeah. They unanimously agree that wastefulness isn't just, a minor economic inefficiency.
Right.
They frame it as a fundamental violation of reality itself.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and modern neuroscience to figure out why the simple act of throwing things away actually literally breaks our brains.
Because to really grasp the gravity of this, we have to look at the fundamental conflict at play here. The universe, by its very nature, imposes finite constraints, right? There's only so much matter, so much usable energy, and ultimately so much time.
Right. The laws of physics aren't optional.
Exactly. But human desire, however, is potentially infinite. So wastefulness, at its core, is the delusion that these physical constraints simply do not apply to us. It's a profound form of blindness to how the world actually operates.
So as you are listening to this, get ready to look at your own daily consumption through a completely new lens. And I want to be clear right up front here. This is not a guilt trip.
No, absolutely not.
We aren't here to scold you about, using a paper cup or tossing out a takeout container. We're going to explore how practicing what these sources call simple sufficiency might actually be the ultimate life hack for your own psychological well-being. But to understand the mental toll, we have to start with the physical footprint.
We do.
We have to look at what we are actually doing to the world when we toss something in the bin.
Right, because that physical reality is where the disconnect begins. Throwing something away, it severs this deep, invisible tether between the sweat it took to make something and the value it holds. Every single resource, whether it's an organic apple or a manufactured smartphone, represents a massive metabolic cost.
Yes. Real labor.
Real labor, real time, and real life to extract, refine, and create. And when we habitually waste those things, we're basically treating those intense inputs as if they were completely costless.
I saw a phrase in our research for this that really brings that invisible tether to life, and it's embodied energy.
Oh, it's such a great concept.
It's so powerful because when you hold, say, a simple cotton t-shirt, you aren't just holding woven fabric. You are holding the thousands of gallons of water used to grow the cotton.
The human labor required to harvest it and stitch it.
Exactly. And the fossil fuels burned to ship it across an ocean, and the fuel used by the delivery truck to bring it right to your porch. It's all in the shirt.
Yeah, and from a thermodynamic perspective, wasting that t-shirt is a deliberate acceleration of entropy.
Entropy, yeah. The universe trending toward chaos.
Right. You are taking all of that highly organized embodied energy and just returning it to the environment as completely unusable heat or, pollution in a landfill. Economists refer to this as a deadweight loss.
The deadweight loss, wow.
Yeah, and it's fascinating that sustainability science actually views waste not as a personal failing of the consumer, but as a fundamental design flaw of our society. Because in a perfectly closed-loop biological system, like a forest, every single output becomes an input for something else.
There is no waste in a forest.
None. A society that produces permanent waste is basically this mismatched, rogue system operating in total defiance of natural biological laws.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second here, though, because the forest analogy brings up a really good point. If I throw a half-eaten apple into the woods behind my house, isn't that just an apple returning to the earth?
Sure, it decomposes.
Right. Bugs eat it. It becomes fertilizer. So why do the sources use such dramatic phrasing, like calling waste a tax on the future or a literal theft?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really comes down to the complex, zero-sum economic reality of human systems, which operates very, very differently from an apple naturally falling off a tree. Well, the modern store-bought apple you just tossed into the woods, it didn't grow there naturally. It required massive artificial supply chains to get to you.
Oh, right. The embodied energy again.
Exactly. It required subsidized water diverted from drought-prone areas, synthetic fertilizers, diesel fuel for refrigeration and transport. So when you waste it, you aren't merely feeding a beetle in your backyard. You are squandering the finite, highly contested resources it took to get that apple to your kitchen.
But I mean, how does my individual waste actually hurt anyone else? The apple is already in my house. I already paid for it.
Because of how global markets function. When 30% of all food produced is wasted by end consumers, which is roughly at the global average, it artificially inflates global demand.
30%.
Yeah, it's staggering. And that artificially inflated demand drives up the price of land and water and fuel everywhere. So the waste of one person essentially outbids the necessity of another.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, it diverts resources away from marginalized communities who are priced out of the market, and it drains drought-stricken ecosystems just to grow food that will ultimately sit in a landfill. So even if the act of throwing it away feels completely private and consequence-free in the moment, it aggregates into this massive systemic deficit.
That reframes the entire concept of the trash can for me. It's not this magic portal where things just disappear with no consequences. It's a ledger of stolen energy.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And that physical reality of accelerating entropy and damaging the biosphere, I mean, it makes complete sense. But the research shows that damage doesn't actually stop at the environment. This constant cycle of acquiring and discarding, it fundamentally alters our neurobiology.
Yes, the brain science on this is incredible.
Living in this artificial abundance actually rewires our brains to feel empty.
It does, and behavioral economics sheds a lot of light on this through what's called the price-value heuristic or scarcity bias.
The idea that rare things are valuable.
Right. Human brains evolved to determine the value of an item based on how hard it was to acquire. So when mass manufacturing and one-click delivery make resources feel artificially cheap and infinitely plentiful, our brains miscalculate. We reliably underweight the real cost of our possessions, and we literally lose the basic cognitive ability to accurately value the world around us.
And the fMRI studies on this blew my mind. When you consume something mindfully, like when you really, really savor a meal or appreciate a well-crafted tool, it actively engages a specific part of your brain called the anterior cingulate cortex.
Yes, the ACC.
Yeah, and that is basically the brain's internal appraiser, right? At the value signaling hub that tells you, hey, this is good, this is rewarding.
Yeah.
But when you fall into a habit of mindless disposal, like constantly buying cheap things and trashing them a week later, you literally numb that neural circuit.
The appraiser basically goes to sleep.
Exactly. And that is what fosters this deep, pervasive sense of detachment and restlessness that so many people feel today.
And that neural numbness leads directly to a psychological state known as ego depletion. Chronic wasteful choices, like, say, constant online impulse buying or ordering massive amounts of food, you probably won't eat, actively wear out your prefrontal cortex.
Which is the part of the brain that handles self-control, right?
Yes, it's the region responsible for executive function and inhibitory control. It is essentially your brain's braking system.
So by constantly giving in to the urge to just buy, consume, and discard, you are effectively burning out your own brakes.
You are systematically exhausting them, yeah. As that prefrontal cortex weakens from the daily micro-decisions of managing all this excess, it becomes much, much harder for you to regulate your behavior in completely unrelated areas of your life.
Wait, really? Unrelated areas?
Absolutely. You might find it suddenly difficult to stick to your health goals, or, you might snap at your partner over something totally trivial simply because your inhibitory control has been drained by the sheer cognitive load of managing an artificial surplus.
Wow, that explains so much about modern burnout. We are trying to cure the emptiness of a numbed value hub with more consumption.
which doesn't work.
No, it's like drinking salt water to cure your thirst.
Yeah.
You just end up bloated and infinitely more thirsty, drowning in decision fatigue.
It's a classic evolutionary mismatch. Throughout almost all of human history, we evolved in harsh, resource-scarce environments. And in those conditions, displaying a surplus was a highly adaptive way to signal status, attract mates, and ensure survival. Amassing things meant you were safe.
Right. If you had a huge pile of grain, you weren't going to starve through the winter.
Exactly. But today, in a mass society completely flooded with cheap goods, acting on that ancient biological drive leads to an endless distraction cycle.
I think everyone listening knows the distraction cycle. It's spending your entire Saturday organizing a junk drawer full of tangled mystery cables and random screws that you haven't used in 5 years, but you are absolutely terrified to throw away.
Oh, that junk drawer is the perfect metaphor. You spend an enormous amount of your finite time managing, cleaning, organizing, and eventually discarding excessive goods. But instead of feeling like a successful, secure survivor, the brain registers the disconnect between the effort you expended and the sheer volume of stuff you own.
Because it was too easy to get.
Right. It feels unearned. And this breeds ambient anxiety and, surprisingly, a form of material imposter syndrome.
Material imposter syndrome, that is wild.
Ah.
So you are surrounded by a mountain of things you didn't truly earn through proportional effort. So the brain just flags your entire environment as inauthentic.
Yes, exactly.
So your value centers are numbed, your self-control is completely depleted, and you are trapped in a weekend cycle of managing plastic junk.
Yeah.
It's no wonder this internal chaos eventually spills outward into how we treat other human beings.
Oh, the transition from material waste to social decay is heavily documented. The psychological framework we use to treat objects inevitably becomes the blueprint for how we treat people.
Thorstein Veblen, a sociologist from all the way back in 1899, he saw this coming perfectly. He coined the term conspicuous consumption.
A very famous concept.
Yeah, and his theory was that people use blatant waste to signal social status. By demonstrating that you have so much wealth you can afford to literally destroy or discard valuable resources, you are broadcasting power to your peers.
But Veblen also observed the inherent social backlash to this behavior. While the wasteful person genuinely believes they are signaling power and success, highly visible waste actually triggers a deep sense of moral disgust in the people watching.
Like when someone orders a $500 steak and just takes one bite.
Exactly. It doesn't inspire awe, right? It actively erodes the social fabric and degrades social trust within a community.
And the modern data really brings Veblen's theory into the 21st century. Habitual squanderers actually scored demonstrably lower on the interpersonal reactivity index.
Right. And for context, that index is a standard psychological tool used to measure empathy. The research indicates that people who live in a heavily insulated bubble of entitled, wasteful consumption struggle significantly with perspective taking.
Which means seeing things from someone else's point of view.
Yes. Because their environment bends entirely to their momentary whims, they find it genuinely difficult to imagine the needs, struggles, or complex viewpoints of others.
Okay, I have to pause and ask this on behalf of the listener because it sounds like a massive leap.
Sure.
Does tossing out a perfectly good phone just because I want the shiny new camera lens really mean I'm going to treat my friends worse?
Right.
Like, is it really a direct pipeline from e-waste to being a terrible person?
What's fascinating here is the underlying psychological mechanism. Throwing away a phone doesn't instantly make you a malicious person.
Right.
The danger lies in the subtle, gradual erosion of what moral psychologists call the fairness domain.
Okay, walk us through how that erosion happens.
So, if you live in a highly curated environment where everything is instantly replaceable, where nothing requires repair or patience or sustained attention, you lose vital mental friction. You are systematically conditioning your brain to believe that the moment something is slightly flawed, difficult, or no longer immediately entertaining, the correct and easiest response is to just discard it and acquire a new one.
Ah, I see where this is going.
Yeah, that pervasive throwaway culture mindset doesn't stay neatly confined to your electronics or your wardrobe. The brain generalizes the habit, it bleeds into human relationships. People become viewed as disposable commodities.
So if a friendship requires difficult communication or a colleague is challenging.
Or a marriage hits a rough patch, yes. The conditioned, frictionless response is simply to discard the relationship and find a new one.
Wow. Treating things as disposable literally trains the neural pathways to treat human beings as disposable. That is incredibly sobering.
It really highlights the stakes, doesn't it?
It makes you realize how high the stakes actually are. But having diagnosed these massive physical, neurological, and social diseases of wastefulness, I want to pivot to the cure. Because the 2,500 years of philosophy and religion we pulled from, they didn't just point out the problem, they offered a rigorously tested solution.
They offered profound solutions, and while their vocabularies differ wildly across centuries and continents, their core prescriptions are remarkably aligned. The classical thinkers didn't view wastefulness merely as an economic error. They categorized it as a severe corruption of the human character.
Aristotle is a great starting point here. He built his ethics around the concept of the golden mean, which relies on phronesis, or practical wisdom. He placed prodigality, which is his term for reckless wastefulness, as a vice of absolute excess. And on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, he placed the vice of stinginess and greed.
And Aristotle introduces a brilliant distinction here that we often lose today, which is the difference between extravagance and magnificence.
I love this part.
It's so important. Extravagance is spending purely to gain personal admiration. It is burning resources for vanity. Magnificence, on the other hand, is spending greatly, but specifically for the public good.
Right, like utilizing vast resources to build a public library, or fund a university, or host a massive citywide festival.
Exactly. The scale of the resource isn't the problem. The intent is.
The Stoics echo that sentiment perfectly, too. Seneca and Epictetus viewed waste as the ultimate symptom of a distracted mind, like a complete lack of attention and presence. There's that incredible historical example of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius.
Oh, the auction, yes.
Yeah. When the empire was facing a financial crisis to fund a military campaign, rather than taxing the public more, he literally held a 2-month public auction in the Roman Forum, selling off the imperial palace furnishings, gold goblets, and even his wife's silk robes.
Because to the Stoics, hoarding or squandering resources was showing active contempt for the gifts of the universe.
Exactly. And as we broaden out into the major religious traditions, we see a universal, foundational shift in how humans are supposed to interact with the material world. It is the shift from the rigid concept of ownership to the fluid concept of stewardship.
That is the turning point in all these texts. It's the radical idea that you don't actually own anything at all. You are merely holding it in trust for a brief period of time.
And we see this exact mechanism independently developed everywhere. Whether you are looking at the Islamic concept of israf, which links extravagance directly to ingratitude,
Or the Jewish law of baltashit, which prohibits the mindless destruction of anything useful.
yes, or the Christian parable of the talents. They aren't just reciting arbitrary rules. Along with the Buddhist middle way and the Hindu principle of aparigraha, or non-possessiveness, they are independently identifying a psychological trap. They reframe human beings from arrogant owners to temporary stewards.
And by reframing us as stewards, these traditions build in that necessary mental friction we discussed earlier. They force the brain to pause and ask, am I using this resource to fulfill a purpose, or am I destroying it because I simply can?
I have to push back here, though, just a bit. Listening to all of this heavy philosophy, it sounds a bit exhausting.
How so?
Well, are we supposed to just never buy a coffee, never celebrate a birthday, and become these miserable ascetics counting every single grain of rice to ensure we aren't wasting anything?
This raises an important question, and it is the critical nuance that often gets lost in modern conversations about minimalism or sustainability. None of these traditions, not the ancient philosophers, not the religious prophets, and certainly not modern psychologists, condemn joy or feasts or abundance.
So where exactly is the line drawn between experiencing joy and committing waste?
The line is drawn entirely by purpose. Generosity is universally celebrated. A lavish, abundant meal shared with your community binds people together. It builds social trust. Donating a massive surplus is an act of charity that strengthens the fabric of society.
So abundance isn't the enemy.
Not at all. Waste is purely defined as use without purpose or destruction without benefit. It is taking something that required intense human labor, time, and planetary resources and destroying it for absolutely no reason other than carelessness, vanity, or just a momentary lack of attention.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, trying to navigate a modern world that is literally designed by algorithms to make you tap "buy now" without a second thought? It means that to waste is to act as if you are a creator who can just magically pull matter from the void, rather than accepting that you are a mortal tenant living on a very fragile, interconnected planet.
It's a fundamental shift in identity.
It really is. Practicing mindful use isn't about carrying around guilt for every paper towel you use. It's actually a life hack. It is a proven pathway to regaining your psychological clarity, restoring your humility, and keeping your sanity intact.
Mindful use restores that ontological link between effort and value that the modern world tries so hard to hide. When you recognize the inherent value in what you already possess, you naturally slow down. You significantly reduce the cognitive burden on your prefrontal cortex, you restore your capacity for empathy, and you finally step off that endless distraction cycle of managing things you never really needed.
There is one final resource we have to talk about before we wrap up today. The Stoic philosopher Seneca made this incredible observation a couple of thousand years ago, and it has never been more relevant than it is right now. He pointed out that people are fiercely protective of their physical property.
Oh, definitely.
They will build high fences, hire guards, and lock their doors to protect their stuff. But those same people are completely careless with the most precious, absolutely non-renewable resource of all, which is time. Time is the only thing we actually should be fiercely covetous of. Every moment you spend acquiring, managing, organizing, and eventually throwing away unnecessary physical stuff is a moment permanently stolen from your true purpose.
And if we accept the premise that every wasted physical object represents a tragic theft of embodied energy and human labor, then we have to turn that lens onto our digital lives too.
Ooh, the digital junk drawer.
Exactly. Every minute you spend passively consuming digital junk food, mindless scrolling, engaging with outrage bait, swiping through endless algorithm feeds, is a literal theft of your own embodied energy. It is a theft of your own cognitive potential. So if you stop treating your attention as a cheap, disposable commodity, what magnificent thing could you build with the surplus?